Africa, we are back with another episode of Building a Better South Africa Together, brought to you by Anglo American and Why. My name is Nia Brown and I will be your host for today. Today's episode, we're going to dive into the subject of mental health, right? There was a report that was done by UNICEF that said that 60% of young people are dealing with the uphill battle of mental illness, and 63% of that 60% did not reach out for help, did not reach out for support, simply because they didn't know where to go. So joining me on the show today to help us dive into this subject is Rutendo Mahowa from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. Hello, Rutendo. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Nia. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Let's dive into the subject of mental health, right? Has there been a spike in mental health issues among young people in South Africa? And if so, what is the cause? What is the reason for it?
Definitely there has been. So what we're seeing is that there is a lot of unemployment in the country. And I think as a young person growing up in South Africa at this time, you also have the stress of, I want to provide for the family. Or you have the stress of, I want to finish quickly so that at least I'm able to do what we know as black tax. So sometimes all these things a young person has to navigate. And sometimes that's when you find maybe behaviors that are not so aligned with us managing our mental health well. So we are seeing a rise in mental health challenges amongst the youth. And even with matric students, for example, most of the times there is a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of people can actually relate to that. And that pressure comes from, you need to be able to finish now so that you get into university. And then from university, you're already thinking about, I need to make money. I need to make sure that I'm taking care of my family. So because of all this pressure, people get to a point where they're struggling. And the concentration at school is even depleting because of that. So I do think the pressure is quite there. And that's what now leads to anxiety, depression, or even substance abuse in order to manage the problem itself.
Yes. I did read an article on the SADC website that was talking about Gen Z, right? The Gen Zers and how they kind of deal with anxiety and what the causes of that anxiety is. And one of the things that was mentioned in that article is that Gen Zers feel a lot of pressure from social media, right? They see a particular lifestyle from a particular celebrity and they think to themselves, oh my goodness, what do I need to do to get there? So they put all this pressure on themselves to try to get there. That leads to depression, that leads to anxiety. And of course, we then start to see certain behaviors, which is what you mentioned earlier on. What are some of the behaviors that we are seeing and then we are noting from young people today? And what are some of the behaviors that are very, very apparent?
Yeah, I think that's so right, the point that you mentioned earlier, specifically about how when we're on social media, we're consuming too much content. So most of the times you want to live the life that someone else is portraying. So people do get to that point of adopting very unhealthy behaviors to get that lifestyle, whether it's now exchanging sexual favors in order to make sure that you earn a quick bag. Or so now we live in a generation where we termed the term blessers. It comes from that. Because then again, we're seeing people exemplify a certain lifestyle that we want, but unfortunately we can't always get it in the most healthy of ways, whether it's finding a job, but because it also goes back to that idea of unemployment that I mentioned earlier. That we do get to that point where the unemployment is so high, but the needs are still there. Whether it's, I need to have food, I need to have money to finish my studies. So the needs that any normal human being has, they're still there, but they're just being met in an unhealthy way. And sometimes the stress itself of needing to provide, people then tend to adopt substance abuse as a way of coping. So that's why amongst our youth, we're also seeing a rise specifically in the intake of substances. So it's specifically between the ages of 15 to 18. That's the fastest growing age group that is now using substances. So it's being seen amongst young people specifically. So I think it is an issue, and some of the behaviors that we begin to adopt to deal with the challenges of unemployment are not always the healthiest ones.
Now, the universities of South Africa did a study with around 29,000 students, and they found that 70% of those students did not reach out for help. They know that they are dealing with mental health issues, but they did not reach out for help. What do you think is the reason for this? Are young people too afraid to reach out for help, or is it that they don't know where to go to find help?
I think it's a bit of both. So you will find that there are people who don't know about mental health at all. So for example, when I was doing my my university, I didn't know that there were organizations outside of our school. Like I went to the University of Wits and they specifically CCDU where students can go and receive support. I knew about that, but I didn't know outside of that what organizations are there to offer support, like your South African Depression of Anxiety, which is where I work now. So I think sometimes people don't have knowledge of what services are out there, and that's where the problem actually starts. Because if you don't know the services that are out there for help, you're not going to reach out.
Exactly.
So even though, yes, there might be organizations or there might be support out there for students, it's not something that they're very much aware of. And for that reason, then they're not really going to access the support. And then on the other hand of that, it's people who are afraid of stigma to say that if I do reach out for support, how would I look in front of my family? How do I look in front of my friends? Because we still come from communities that really don't think that mental health, depression, anxiety, or bipolar, or any other mental disorder is real. So for that reason, people then end up getting to a point of saying that I don't want to be stigmatized. I don't want people to think that I'm weak. I don't want people to look at me differently than they see me now. So for that reason, then people end up shying away from actually getting help.
Yeah.
Simply because of that perception that is associated with people who then have mental health challenges. Yeah.
We were talking about the pressure that young people are facing at the moment. I mean, there's an economic strain. Unemployment is at an all-time high. It's crazy for us right now. We're just trying to navigate the circumstances that we have been dealt with, right? And now we're moving into exam season, which also brings on its own pile of pressure as well. How can young people out there make use of SADC, especially in those moments where they start to feel overwhelmed?
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the era that we're in. There's so much information out there, and part of what we're trying to do at SADC is create a space where people are able to access information. Because one of the things that I believe is that knowledge is power, and the more information that you're able to access, the better you are able to manage your mental health. So on our website, we have for young people different material on just how to manage exam stress, for example. And then on TikTok, we're also using platforms, social media, now in a healthy way. So I know earlier we mentioned that social media is being used in unhealthy ways. We start to consume so much information, but it leads us to wanting what other people have. But because of unemployment, we might not be able to access it. But we're trying to use social media as a way of connecting people to support by sharing tips on exams, by sharing information about this is what depression is, this is what anxiety is, and this is how you manage it. So on Facebook, for example, we also have a segment called Ask the Expert, where we try to bring different experts to speak about burnout, about anxiety, exam stress, so that at least we're able to equip our young people with information that they can now use to manage their mental health. And we also have specifically now for matric students, we have a support group that runs on Wednesday as well as on Sundays. And this is specifically to talk about managing matric stress, pressure, and how to also create a study guide so that at least they are able to manage the stress that is accompanying where they're at in life. Because those are not very easy stages that they're in. And I do think that our community places so much pressure on young people to say that you need to get it right the first time. And that pressure also leads people to feeling like I have no option but to succeed. And when that happens, then the concentration that starts to get affected then is not, it's not so great. Because at the end of the day, it's also important for us to alleviate that pressure by reminding them that this is not the only time.
Exactly.
It's okay if you fail, that you try again. But in our minds, we're also putting that pressure to say that you only have this one chance. And I think having that pressure on them is what now gets them to feeling like if I fail, I'll be disappointing my loved ones. And because I can't manage that anxiety, that pressure, I end up getting to a point of having suicidal ideation, where now, and it starts to get worse to a point where people start to sit down and plan to say, this is how I'm going to end my life. Because it's all that pressure, that burden of feeling like if I fail, I am disappointing an entire generation.
Which is not true,
Yeah.
right? Which is not true. And again, you can always try again, right? We're about to move into the festive season now. And as we know, young people during the festive season, we like to put it nicely, have a good time, right? How important is mental health just in general going into the festive season? What would you say are some of the things that we need to remember as we enjoy the festive season?
I think one of the things to remember is that not everyone has a very close-knit family. So some people do come from places where with their families they're not as close as we think they are. And I think whenever you think the holiday season, you think people are sitting around having a good time, having a good laugh. And it's not always the case for everyone. So some people are going home to a family where there's a lot of abuse, or they're going to homes where they're the only ones because it's a child-headed home. So because of those reasons, it does sort of put that loneliness, it highlights that loneliness that people have. Because then again, you're not sitting around the family as often advertised in TV shows. You're not doing all these family meals where you're eating a lot of food and things like that. So even though that's the picture that a lot of people have, that's not the reality that a lot of people have. For many people, it's a reality that they are lonely during the holiday seasons. So I think one of the things to understand is that what we may have, other people may not have. And I think it's very important that we also create a space where those people who are alone are able to feel part of the community. And I know there's a lot of organizations as well that just invite people who are feeling lonely in that season just to gather with other people and to be around other people. And it started, our telephone lines are 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So we try to make sure that even if it's the holiday season, people are still able to access the help. So if they are at that point of, I'm feeling lonely, I don't have anyone to talk to, then it's okay to pick up the phone and call a SADA counselor, because that's why our lines are running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's just to make sure that those people who don't have access to the communities also are able to access some sort of support. Because I think part of what we try to do in terms of managing mental health is to improve community. Because when we don't have community and we don't have support, that's when we're likely to feel very alone.
Exactly.
And again, the thoughts of, I don't want to be here anymore.
Start to creep in. Yeah, exactly. Very, very scary stuff. Rutendo, thank you so much for joining me on the show today and for sharing your insights on mental health. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, and thank you so much for having us.
Of course, of course. Alrighty, so we're going to wrap up that very, very important conversation around mental health. I hope this is just a reminder to you to take care of those around you and to seek help if you really, really need it. Please do not be afraid to ask for help. Go out, ask for help if you feel that you need it. And of course, this is the last important conversation of many important conversations that we have had in this web series. I mean, we've touched on many, many different subjects. If you missed any of them, go back, watch them, and of course you can discuss amongst yourself, discuss amongst your family and your community, and find ways in which we can build a better South Africa together. My name is Nia Brown. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a fantastic festive season, and I'll see you soon. Bye.